And the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana has kept the policy rate unchanged. The committee kept the rate at 14.5%. Addressing the media a while ago, Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. ERNEST ADDISON, said this was due to some risk to inflation outlook. He has also been speaking about a buffer for financial institutions during this period of the pandemic.
To respond that all the measures that we put into place in the interest of depositors, as well as in the longer term, the interest of the investors themselves, because you also what happens when banks are undercapitalized and have liquidity issues is the depositors who fail to get access to their deposits in the banks. So we are trying to be risk averse and in a sense to protect depositors so that the banks will be careful about how they dissipate earnings. And all that we are saying is that we can see the evolution of, weaker economic conditions, which means in the outlook, one can expect that credit impairments would go up. One can expect that the banks will face a more challenging environment, and all of that will translate into non-performing loans. And therefore, it's important that we conserve the liquidity and the capital that the banks have at this time. So if you think about it, in the long run, it's in the interest of the shareholders themselves that the institutions will be stronger even after the end of this pandemic. We are going through this problem at a time that we have just completed a reform of the banking sector. We have strengthened their capital positions, and therefore the banks are in a much stronger position to manage the developments that have taken place. Nevertheless, we are beginning to see emerging signs of weakness. Profits are going down, their operational costs are going up, the net interest income for banks are beginning to decline. So these are all warning signs in terms of the outlook. But overall, we think that they have the buffers. They have the capital buffers and they have the liquidity buffers to handle this pandemic. Obviously, if things turn out to be much worse than currently projected, you would have a weaker banking sector. But for now, the current projections do not suggest that things would revert back to where we started. This is
Dr. ERNEST ADDISON also has this projection for the economy as we tackle the pandemic.
I think the economy, the buffers of the Ghanaian economy, and the growth projections, because this is really the work that has been done internally from the Bank of Ghana, looking at the developments, and on the basis of the projections that have been done from the World Economic Outlook. If you look at the projections for global growth, you're looking at a 3% decline in global growth. Just looking at the statistical relationship between the growth of the Ghanaian economy and global growth, we have been able to draw some, inferences. And one of those inferences is what we are telling you, that we think the Ghanaian economy will grow between 2% and 2.5%. Now, these things are still developing. If things get worse than they currently are, these projections will change. So it's a situation which is still evolving. But for now, these are the projections that our technical people were able to put together. And then you asked the question about whether the banks were implementing the policy measures that were announced in the last MPC. To the best of our knowledge, they are. And we have been meeting with the chief executives of the banks. The last time we met was on a week today. They gave us updates on where they are. Many of their clients, customers of the banks, have gone to restructure facilities. Loan maturities have been extended. for quite a number of customers. I think the data is there. I think over 3,000 or more bank customers have had their loans restructured. Some even reported that some customers were thinking that it was a forgiveness. But the issue is not about loan forgiveness. The issue is about restructuring. Instead of paying the loan in maybe 6 months or 1 year, they are renegotiating to extend these loans to a year or 2.
Well, my colleague Aboagye-Wiafe has been covering that press conference for us. He joins me with more on that. George, what other reasons were given for holding the rate at 14.5%? What other reasons were given for holding the rate at 14.5%?
Well, Dara, you know this rate is more of a measure that the Bank of Ghana uses to check the amount of money in circulation and also the cost of credit in the country. So what they believe that there are still some uncertainties on the outlook, and therefore you still want to wait before you respond with additional measures. And that is why they thought that if you look at things right now, the right thing to do is just to hold the rate and look at how things would happen. You know, the COVID-19 is still impacting badly on several economies, and therefore you want to watch things carefully and see whether you have to respond. Oh, don't forget that already they've taken some measures in trying to improve liquidity of these commercial banks and free credit to small businesses. So they thought that, listen, let's hold on for a while, even though we also think that there's some risk to the inflation outlook. Let's hold on for a while, and that is why they kept the rate at 14.5% in terms of policy rate for commercial banks. That is the rate at which these banks are their lend from the Bank of Ghana.
And what other issues came up at that press briefing?
Now, let's start with the economy, because the Bank of Ghana is talking about more of a COVID-19 relief bond that they've issued, a 10-year bond with a value of 5.5 billion Ghana cedis. The governor also talked about a special package that they have in place in terms of a 10 billion facility that they stand ready to support the government with. Let's talk about the banking industry that Mr. Pope will also be looking up to. In terms of the savings and loans company, the governor said that they also stand ready to provide additional support to these banks in terms of reliefs to them. For those who might be facing financial challenges, the Bank of Ghana says it stands ready to provide some liquidity support to them. This wouldn't be free cash, Darrell. This would be more of a loan facility to them, which they are supposed to pay back. Darrell, you also know that by December this year, the rural banks and the microfinance companies are supposed to meet their new minimum capital requirement. What the Bank of Ghana governor says is that this has been extended to December 2021 owing to this current COVID-19 and its impact on funding arrangement. They've given them an extra 1 year to work up and actually meet the new minimum capital requirement. And the governor also said that they stand ready to also provide some additional funding support for the rural banks and also ensure that in terms of rural support, the Bank of Ghana also stand ready to provide other support to them based on requests to the central bank.
Right, George, just in a few seconds, the governor has also been speaking about the city's performance. What did he have to say? Just in a few seconds, the governor has also been speaking about the city's performance.
Well, Darrell, he talked about the fact that the recent blips were expected because that is what you should be seeing in an exchange market. But they've also purchased some dollars overseas to provide or to improve their reserves. So it looks like they are in a very strong position now to support the Ghana cedi and defend it. So for those who might want to be betting on it and the speculators, in terms of support, in terms of reserves, the Bank of Ghana is in a strong position to support and defend the Ghana cedi.
All right, Aboagye-Wiafe, thanks very much indeed.